The need for silence was a physical ache, a deep thrumming in my bones that had been building for 3 straight years. My life had been a cacophony of sirens, shouting, the staccato clicks of keyboards cataloging human misery, and the relentless, grinding noise of the legal system. As the recently appointed regional director for the State Bureau of Investigations, I had just closed the book on the largest racketeering case in the state's history. It had been a victory, a career-defining achievement that had put 24 corrupt officials behind bars. It had also cost me a piece of my soul. I saw the case when I closed my eyes. I heard the wiretap recordings in my sleep. My doctor called it burnout. I called it a haunting. My mandatory 6-month sabbatical wasn't a vacation. It was an exorcism. That's why I bought the house in Willow Creek Gardens. The name itself was a balm. It promised tranquility, a gentle, orderly existence worlds away from the violent chaos I managed for a living. The house was modest but elegant, tucked away on a quiet cul-de-sac. Its primary feature a secluded backyard, bordered by a thick stand of mature oak trees. It was here I planned to heal, to rebuild the quiet spaces in my mind that my job had systematically demolished. My first project, before a single box was fully unpacked, was to create a small karasen-sui, a Japanese sand garden. It was to be my sanctuary, a place for meditation, where the only patterns I had to analyze were the ones my own rake would draw in the pristine white sand. The part of me that was just Evelyn desperately needed this. The part of me that was Director Reed had to be locked away. I was on my knees, leveling the fine, silvery grains within the simple cedar frame, when a shadow fell over me. I looked up, squinting into the afternoon sun. A woman stood on the edge of my freshly laid sod, her arms crossed, her body language radiating a hostility that was as out of place in this peaceful setting as a lit flare. She was in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a crisp linen blazer, her face a mask of stern disapproval. In one hand, she held a clipboard. It was, I would soon learn, her scepter. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice neutral as I rose to my feet, wiping the dust from my jeans. I made a conscious effort to smile, to project warmth, to be a neighbor. "I know who you are," she said, her voice sharp, clipped. "You're the new owner at Lot 72. I am Eleanor Vance, president of the Willow Creek Gardens Homeowners Association, and you have a problem." "I do?" I asked, a feeling of profound weariness washing over me. I had dealt with cartel leaders and serial killers who had better manners. My internal, professional voice, the one I was trying to silence, immediately began a threat assessment, noting her rigid posture, the proprietary way her eyes scanned my property. I forcibly shut it down. "You are not Director Reed right now. You are Evelyn. Be nice." She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on her clipboard. Bylaw 113, subsection D, paragraph 2. Approved ground coverings. It lists, in exhaustive detail, the acceptable materials for all landscaped areas: fescue grass, zoysia grass, pine bark mulch in earth tone colors, and riverstone not to exceed 1 inch in diameter. There is no mention. She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes narrowing, of sand, and certainly not white sand. It's glaring. It lowers the aesthetic consistency of the entire neighborhood. I stared from her severe face to my small, 4 by 6 foot cedar box of sand. "It's a contained feature, Mrs. Vance. A miniature garden. It's not as if I'm turning my entire lawn into a beach." "Details are irrelevant," she snapped. "Rules are not guidelines, Dr. Reed. They are the very fabric that holds this community together and protects our investment, our property values. An unapproved installation, no matter how small, is a tear in that fabric. It creates a precedent. There was a frantic, almost desperate edge to the way she said property values, as if the phrase itself was a protective mantra. My professional mind, refusing to stay quiet, flagged that emotional tell. This wasn't about power for its own sake. This was about fear. But I pushed the analysis away. I assure you, I have no plans for plastic flamingos, I said, forcing another smile. I simply wanted a small space for meditation. Perhaps there's a variance process I could apply for. The Variance Committee, which I chair, does not approve installations that so flagrantly disregard the established community palette, she said, the statement delivered with the finality of a death sentence. You have 48 hours to remove the unapproved material and replace it with an acceptable ground cover. I suggest the number 4 grade river stone. It has a pleasing, neutral gray tone. She made a sharp, decisive checkmark on her clipboard. A formal notice of violation will be in your mailbox tomorrow. Welcome to Willow Creek. With that, she turned on her heel and marched away, her back ramrod straight. I watched her go, not with anger, but with a cold, analytical dread. The internal conflict was already beginning. Evelyn, the new homeowner, felt disheartened and exhausted. Director Reed, the investigator, saw a predictable, controllable subject, a problem to be managed. I had come here seeking sanctuary from my other self, but it seemed my first challenge was a woman who was forcing me to choose which one I was going to be. My first instinct, born of a deep, soul-crushing weariness, was to comply, fighting this woman, engaging in a war of attrition over sand, was the very antithesis of the quiet life I was trying to build. Just give her the win. The Evelyn part of me pleaded, it doesn't matter. So, with a sigh that felt like it carried the weight of my entire career, I spent the next afternoon shoveling out the beautiful, silvery white sand and replacing it with the HOA-approved, soul-crushingly dull gray riverstone. It looked like a pet's litter box. The meditative quality was gone, replaced by a visual testament to my capitulation. I hated it, but I had demonstrated compliance. The first step in de-escalating a hostile subject. In my old world, it was about showing a target you weren't a threat. Here, I hoped it would simply make Eleanor find a new hobby. My hope was naive. A week later, the second notice of violation arrived. It was delivered in a stiff, cream-colored envelope, the HOA logo embossed in gold at the top. This time, the offense was auditory. Violation of Bylaw, 78, Section B, Noise and Nuisance. The letter began. A wind chime apparatus has been installed on the rear patio of the property. The resulting intermittent, high-frequency metallic tinkling, as reported by a neighboring resident, constitutes an unsanctioned auditory disturbance. A fine of $50 is hereby levied. Removal of the apparatus is required within 24 hours to prevent further fines, which will double on a daily basis. The wind chime had been a housewarming gift from my sister. It was made of hollow bamboo and produced a soft, woody clacking that I found deeply soothing. High-frequency metallic tinkling was a deliberate, malicious mischaracterization. There was, of course, only one neighboring resident it could be. Eleanor's house backed onto the same small patch of woods as mine. She was the only one close enough to even hear it. This time, the compliance felt different. It felt less like a strategic choice and more like a surrender. As I took down the chimes, the quiet they left behind felt heavy, accusatory. This was when the investigator in me refused to be sidelined any longer. I paid the fine, but I also opened a new file on my secure, encrypted laptop. I labeled it Vance, E. Domestic. I scanned the first violation notice, the canceled check for the Riverstones, the second violation notice, and the new check for the $50 fine. I began a timeline, a simple log of interactions, violations, and actions taken. It was standard procedure, the kind of meticulous record-keeping that wins court cases. It felt absurd to be applying the same methodology to a neighborhood dispute. But Eleanor's aggression was systematic, and my response had to be as well. The next violation came 4 days later. This one concerned a small, elegant stand of Fargesia rufa bamboo I had planted. Eleanor's letter cited a non-existent master plant list and declared the bamboo a potentially invasive species, demanding its immediate removal. This time, there was no fine, only a warning that failure to comply would result in the HOA hiring a landscaping firm to remove it at my expense, at a cost not to exceed $2,500. This was a significant escalation. It moved from petty fines to a direct threat of financial injury and property invasion. I did not remove the bamboo. Instead, I sent a polite, registered letter to the HOA board, complete with the botanical specifications of the bamboo and documentation from the nursery. I stated, respectfully, but firmly, that any attempt by the HOA to enter my property would be treated as criminal trespassing. I had drawn a line. Eleanor's response was to escalate from bureaucratic harassment to direct, physical action. I came home 2 days later to find my meditation garden had been vandalized. The pristine gray riverstones were churned up. A small, carved stone lantern I had placed in the center was knocked over, a chip marring its surface. It was a petty act of destruction, but its message was loud and clear. I can touch your things. I can invade your sanctuary. Nothing is safe. It was also, crucially, deniable. But this act, more than any other, solidified the conflict within me. Evelyn, the homeowner, felt violated and furious. Her place of peace had been desecrated. Director Reed, the investigator, saw it as a predictable escalation. The subject, having failed to achieve compliance through administrative pressure, had moved to intimidation and property damage. The two halves of myself were now in perfect, angry alignment. That evening, I did not call a commercial security company. I accessed a catalog of vendors used by the Bureau for sensitive location monitoring. I ordered a set of 4 low-light, high-definition, hardwired cameras. I paid for them with my personal credit card, drawing a clear line between my professional and personal life. As I planned the camera placements, my mind worked through the analytical process. I wasn't just thinking about covering entry points. I was creating overlapping fields of observation. Eleanor Vance thought she was in a neighborhood spat. She had no idea she had just become the subject of a surveillance operation. The file on my laptop grew, now appended with photographs of the damage and the receipt for the new surveillance system. The narrative of her harassment was beginning to write itself. With the cameras installed, a quiet sense of security returned to the house. I knew any further direct action would be captured. Eleanor, perhaps sensing this, shifted her tactics again. Her next assault was on my reputation, waged in the community's private online forum and monthly newsletter. Her article, Protecting Our Shared Serenity, was a masterpiece in passive-aggressive propaganda, painting me as a selfish, uncooperative threat to property values. The effect was immediate. The few neighbors who had offered hesitant waves now averted their gazes. I was being socially quarantined. The only exception was a woman named Sarah, who lived 2 doors down. A kind, gentle soul in her 60s. I saw her struggling one morning with a stuck sprinkler head near the edge of her lawn. This was a chance for Evelyn, the neighbor, to act. Morning, Sarah, I said, approaching slowly. Looks like you're having a battle there. She startled, looking up with wide, nervous eyes. Oh, Dr. Reed. Yes, this silly thing is stuck again. Let me take a look, I offered. Sometimes they just get jammed with a bit of grit. I knelt, and with a few practice twists, managed to free the mechanism. It popped up and began to spray. Oh, thank you, she said, her relief palpable. I don't know what I would have done. Happy to help, I said, smiling. We stood in a slightly awkward silence for a moment, before I decided to be direct. It's a beautiful neighborhood, though I get the sense the community rules are a little intense. Sarah's face clouded over. She glanced nervously toward Eleanor's house, which was visible down the street. You have no idea, she whispered. Just be careful. Eleanor, she can be a lot. I've noticed, I said dryly. She seems very passionate about property values. Sarah let out a short, sad laugh. Passionate isn't the word. It's a terror. She and her husband, they lost everything about 15 years ago. They were in real estate, got caught up in some big fraud scheme by a developer, lost their house, their savings, everything. They had to move in with her sister. It took them years to claw their way back to this. She gestured around at the manicured lawns. This isn't just a neighborhood to her. It's proof that she didn't fail. Anyone she thinks is threatening it, even with a wind chime, she sees them as trying to push her back into that failure. It was a stunning piece of intelligence, delivered over a broken sprinkler head. It didn't excuse Eleanor's behavior, but it framed it in the tragic light of trauma. Her cruelty wasn't just a product of a need for power, but of a deep, pathological fear of losing everything again. She was a dragon, guarding a hoard that had been stolen from her once before. Thank you for telling me that, Sarah, I said genuinely. Just watch your step, she said, her eyes pleading. It's easier to just do what she says. The conversation solidified my path forward. I now understood Eleanor's motive, which made her next moves predictable. But her campaign of social isolation was also having the unintended effect of pushing me to seek professional, outside help. I was an expert in criminal investigation, but I knew nothing about civil litigation or HOA law. The next day, I made an appointment with an attorney, a sharp man named Arthur Vance, who specialized in exactly these kinds of disputes. I sat in his neat, book-lined office and laid out my file the violation notices, the photos of the vandalism, the screenshots from the forum, and Sarah's story. Vance listened intently, his fingers steepled. Dr. Reed, he began. You have a classic case of HOA harassment. The problem is, these are notoriously difficult and expensive to fight in civil court. It becomes a he said, she said situation, and a judge might just tell you it's a petty squabble. Her fear-based motivation doesn't make her actions any less legal. Unfortunately, if they are covered by the HOA's broad covenants. So I have no recourse? I asked, a wave of frustration washing over me. I didn't say that, Vance said, a glint in his eye. You mentioned she recommended a specific contractor, and you told me about your neighbor's story. Her obsession is with protecting the investment. What if she's not just protecting it, but profiting from it? I've considered that, I said, my mind immediately shifting back into investigator mode. Good, he said, because while harassment is a legal swamp, fraud is a cliff. If you can find concrete proof that she is misusing HOA funds, engaging in kickback schemes, or using her position for personal financial gain. Then, this whole situation changes. It stops being a civil dispute and becomes a criminal matter. That's a language even the most powerful HOA president understands. My advice: follow the money. Your documentation is excellent. Keep doing it. But start digging into the HOA's financials. As a homeowner, you have the right to review them. Leaving his office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had a clear, legal, and plausible path forward. I wasn't Director Reed abusing her power. I was Evelyn Reed, a private citizen, acting on the sound advice of her attorney. The internal conflict began to subside, replaced by a singular focus. My quiet, methodical investigation into the HOA's finances began that night. The discovery of the financial irregularities changed the entire calculus of the situation. Acting on my lawyer's advice, I formally requested the last 5 years of the HOA's financial records. Eleanor initially resisted, citing privacy concerns, but a sharply worded letter from Arthur Vance, reminding her of her legal obligations under state law, produced the documents. They were a disorganized mess of invoices and budget reports, likely kept that way intentionally to discourage scrutiny. For me, it was like coming home. I spent my evenings methodically building a spreadsheet, cross-referencing payments with state business registries. A clear pattern of systematic overbilling and kickbacks began to emerge. Willow Creek Landscaping, the firm that received an exclusive, no-bid contract year after year, was a registered LLC owned by Eleanor's brother-in-law. The invoices for pool chemical balancing were consistently 40% higher than market rate, paid to a company whose registered address was a P.O. box belonging to her husband's cousin. Eleanor, however, was unaware of my secret investigation. Flush with her success in isolating me, she decided it was time to leverage the full power of the state against me. It happened on a Tuesday morning. 2 official-looking vehicles from the County Department of Environmental Quality pulled up to my curb. 2 inspectors emerged, carrying clipboards and soil testing equipment. The complaint was anonymous, alleging the use of illegal pesticides and the presence of my noxious invasive species of bamboo. I met them at the door with a calm smile. "Good morning," I said. "Please, come in. You're welcome to inspect whatever you need." My lawyer had prepared me for this exact tactic. For the next hour, they conducted their inspection. I provided the botanical documentation for the bamboo and explained my organic gardening practices. I had nothing to hide. Finally, the senior inspector sighed. "Dr. Reed, I apologize for wasting your time. The complaint is baseless." "I understand," I said. "This must be frustrating for you as well." "You have no idea," the other inspector muttered. "This is the 3rd one we've had for this neighborhood in the last year. Always a wild goose chase." "A pattern." "Really?" I said, feigning casual interest. "Is there a public record of these complaints? I'm concerned someone might be harassing residents by abusing your department's resources." The senior inspector handed me his card. "It's all public record under the Freedom of Information Act," he said. "File a request. It will show you the source address of the complaints if they aren't anonymous. If you see a pattern, I'd suggest you talk to a lawyer." "I already have," I said with a thin smile. That very day, Arthur Vance filed the FOIA request on my behalf. The results came back 3 weeks later and were exactly what we expected over the past 2 years. 5 separate formal complaints had been filed against 5 different residents of Willow Creek. All were found to be baseless. 2 of the complaints had not been anonymous. They had been filed by Eleanor Vance herself. The other 3 anonymous complaints originated from an IP address that Vance, through a legal subpoena to the internet service provider, traced directly to Eleanor's home. We now had a documented, provable pattern of her using public agencies as a tool for harassment. This, combined with the financial evidence, was building a formidable case. The pieces were falling into place. My internal conflict was gone. Evelyn, the homeowner, and Director Reed, the investigator, were now one, working in concert, following a legitimate legal path toward a just resolution. We were patient. We were methodical. And we were waiting for Eleanor to make her final mistake. The final escalation, the move that would prove to be her fatal miscalculation, was born of pure, unadulterated hubris and, I now knew, deep-seated panic. My quiet defiance and meticulous lawyer-led approach was something she had never encountered. She couldn't bully me, and her usual tactics of administrative harassment were failing. So, she decided to drop a metaphorical bomb, an act so extreme she believed it would force me to either crumble or flee. The official notice arrived via certified mail. It was a thick envelope containing a multi-page document titled Final Notice of Special Assessment and Intent to Lien. I read it in my home office. It was a compendium of every fabricated violation she had ever accused me of. It listed the sand, the wind chime, the bamboo, and added several new charges: failure to maintain a cooperative community posture, creating a hostile neighborhood environment, and pervasive and willful non-compliance. Each item was assigned an exorbitant, arbitrary fine. But the true venom was in the final section, citing a vague bylaw about the board's power to levy special assessments to protect the integrity and value of the community. Eleanor and her rubber stamp board had voted to impose a single, massive fine upon me: $50,000. The notice stated I had 72 hours to pay, or a lien would be placed on my property, the first step in foreclosure. I stared at the number, not with fear, but with a sudden, clarifying calm. This was it. This wasn't a fine. It was textbook extortion. It was the final, crucial piece of evidence. I immediately called Arthur Vance. "Arthur, it's Evelyn Reed. She's done it." I explained the notice. I could hear him let out a low whistle on the other end of the line. "Evelyn, this is the ball game. This is no longer a civil matter. An attempt to extort a sum this large, using the U.S. mail to deliver the threat, is a federal offense. This is mail fraud, wire fraud, and extortion. This is beyond my pay grade. My official legal advice to you is to take this evidence, all of it, to the authorities. The U.S. Attorney's Office would be very interested in your file." "Thank you, Arthur," I said. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Now, and only now, with a clear legal predicate and the advice of my counsel, did I allow myself to use my professional connections. I picked up my phone and called my deputy director, David. It wasn't a call to a subordinate, but a consultation with a trusted colleague. "David, I have a situation outside of work," I began. I gave him the 30-second overview, framing it as a civilian case I had been building with my lawyer. "My attorney has advised me to make a formal referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office for mail fraud and extortion. I'm calling you for guidance. I need to do this by the book. I cannot have it look like I am abusing my position as director. What is the proper channel for a citizen with my professional background to submit a criminal referral of this nature to ensure it is handled correctly and avoids any appearance of a conflict of interest?" This was a critical distinction. I wasn't ordering an investigation. I was asking for the proper procedure to initiate one as a private citizen. David was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Director," he said, his voice serious. "The correct protocol would be for your attorney to formally submit the evidence package. However, given the subject is an active threat and a confrontation is imminent, I would advise an additional step for your safety. I can, through official channels, request the local precinct to provide a uniformed officer for a civil assist at your location. It's a standard procedure to prevent a breach of the peace. It's not an enforcement action, just a presence." "That would be wise," I agreed. "She's volatile. The notice gives a deadline for tomorrow morning. I expect she'll confront me." "I'll make the call," David said. "I'll request a sharp, level-headed officer. I'll mention it's a sensitive situation requiring discretion. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said. "Send me the standard referral package template. I'm going to be up all night with my lawyer putting this together. We're going to hand the U.S. attorney a case so perfectly documented, so meticulously evidenced, they could indict tomorrow." I hung up the phone. The hunt was over. The trap was set. Eleanor Vance, driven by her own demons, was about to walk onto a stage she thought she controlled, only to find the script had been written by me, edited by my lawyer, and was about to be directed by the full, impartial weight of the justice system. The morning air was crisp and clear, the kind of deceptively beautiful day that seems entirely at odds with impending conflict. I sat on my front porch in a comfortable wicker chair, a mug of steaming chamomile tea cradled in my hands. I was dressed simply, in jeans and a soft sweater. I projected an aura of absolute calm. It wasn't an act. It was the quiet confidence of a person who had followed every rule, every legal step, and knew they were standing on unshakable ground. At precisely 9:55, Eleanor Vance's white Lexus pulled to the curb. She emerged, dressed in a severe navy blue pantsuit, her clipboard in hand. Her nervous board treasurer, Gerald, scurried out of the passenger side, clutching a thick manila envelope. They marched up my walkway. Eleanor's face was a mask of triumphant glee. She saw me sitting there, a lone woman, and in her mind, I was already defeated. She stopped at the bottom of my porch steps. "Dr. Reed," she began, her voice ringing out. "Your 72 hours are nearly up. We are here to receive your payment of $50,000. Or," she gestured to Gerald, who fumbled with the envelope, "we are here to have you sign this consent to lien." I took a slow sip of my tea. "There is no debt, Eleanor," I said, my voice even and quiet. "And that document is not a legal instrument. It is evidence of felony extortion." Her face contorted into a sneer. "Legal jargon won't help you now. You are in violation. You will pay, or you will leave. It's that simple." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, placing my mug down. "And I'm not paying you a single cent." "Fine," she shrieked, the desperation beneath her anger now clear to me. "Then you have forfeited your right to a peaceful resolution, Gerald. Call the police. Tell them we have a hostile resident, refusing to comply with a legal HOA directive, and creating a public disturbance." Gerald fumbled for his phone to make the call. A few minutes later, a local police cruiser turned onto our street. A single officer emerged. He was young, tall, with a sharp, professional bearing. His name tag read, Miller. Eleanor rushed to intercept him. "Thank goodness you're here. Officer, this woman," she pointed an accusatory finger at me, "is in massive financial violation of our legally binding covenants. Her hostile attitude is a threat to public order. I want you to remove her." Officer Miller listened patiently, his expression neutral. He then turned his full attention to my porch. He took 2 steps forward, his eyes locking with mine. Recognition dawned, followed by a wave of shock, and then a profound, instantaneous deference. His posture changed. His back straightened. "Director Reed," he said, his voice barely a whisper, filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Ma'am, what are you doing here?" Eleanor stared, her mouth agape. "Director, what is he talking about, officer? She is the one causing the problem." Officer Miller ignored her. "Ma'am, we got a call about a disturbance." I rose slowly from my chair. "There is no disturbance, Officer Miller," I said, my voice carrying the quiet, unmistakable ring of command. "You are here for a civil assist, as requested. Thank you for your prompt arrival." I walked down the steps. Officer Miller finally turned to Eleanor, his face a mask of cold, hard authority. "Ma'am," he said, his voice sharp, "do you have any idea who this is?" He gestured toward me. "This is Dr. Evelyn Reed. She is the director of the State Bureau of Investigations." He let the title hang in the air. He then delivered the final, devastating line. "She's not just my boss, ma'am. She's my boss's boss's boss." The color drained from Eleanor Vance's face. The clipboard slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the flagstones. The carefully constructed world she had built to protect herself from her past fears had just been annihilated. I looked at her, my expression not of triumph, but of grim finality. "Eleanor Vance," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You are the subject of a formal criminal referral that was filed with the U.S. Attorney's Office this morning. The referral details evidence of racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. A moment ago, in the presence of a police officer, you attempted to enforce an extortionate demand and instructed your associate to file a false police report." I turned to the officer. "Officer Miller, I believe you have sufficient probable cause to detain Mrs. Vance on suspicion of extortion until federal agents arrive." The aftermath was as swift and total as the collapse of Eleanor's world on my front lawn, as Officer Miller placed a stunned and sputtering Eleanor in handcuffs. A second, unmarked car pulled silently to the curb. 2 federal investigators, dispatched by the U.S. Attorney's Office after receiving my lawyer's meticulously prepared evidence package that morning, emerged to take command of the scene. Gerald, the treasurer, began cooperating almost immediately, his testimony sealing Eleanor's fate. The legal consequences were severe. Faced with an airtight case, Eleanor was convicted on multiple federal charges. The judge, citing the predatory and systematic nature of her crimes against her own community, sentenced her to 7 years in a federal prison. Restitution orders and civil suits, filed by other residents led by a newly confident Sarah, and represented by Arthur Vance, stripped her of every asset she had fought so desperately to protect. Her greatest fear, the loss of her home and financial security, was realized not by a random act of fate, but as a direct consequence of her own actions. The community of Willow Creek Gardens underwent a radical transformation. The residents, now aware of the full extent of the corruption, dissolved the old HOA board. A new, far more reasonable association was formed, one focused on community building. Sarah, who had found her voice, was elected its first president. My own life finally found the peace I had craved. My neighbors afforded me a profound level of respect, and, most importantly, privacy. My sand garden, with its brilliant white sand, was finally left undisturbed. The bamboo wind chimes were rehung, Their gentle, woody clatter, a soft, soothing soundtrack to my quiet afternoons. The internal war was over. I had learned that I didn't have to choose between being Evelyn and being Director Reed. I could be both a woman who valued peace and a professional who knew, methodically and legally, how to protect it.